You know what I'll do? I'll actually kick off because we have a very tight schedule here. And I was anyway asked to start giving about 5-10 minutes talk about IoT and the opportunities here in Australia. So I'll start that, and hopefully the rest of the panelists will come down, and we'll get the panel going. So welcome, everybody. It's very exciting to have an IoT panel as part of this summit. The goal of the panel is to discuss, to evolve it around IoT development roadmaps, talking about what's ahead for the next year, what's ahead for the next 5 years, what are the modernization and investment opportunities. So where's the money, in other words? And discuss collaboration opportunities between Israel and Australia in the IoT space. My name is Eitan Binstock. I'm a director in ATP Innovations. You heard a little bit about ATP from Hamish a couple of minutes ago. ATP Innovation is the largest incubator and startup hub where we grow technology startups into global successes in the areas such as life science, hardware, and ICT. I'm also the founder of a new venture called Everything IoT, which we aim to turn Australia into a leader in IoT through focused events, development programs, and funding's accessibility. IoT, I don't think I have to present to people, but you know, from different estimates, it's 50 billion connected devices by year 2020. Different estimates, all talking about tens of trillions of economic value. The recent McKinsey report talked about 10 trillions economic value in a year, where some others talk about it as a overall for the next 10 years. But it's a huge, huge opportunity. The way I like to look at IoT is the perfect marriage between hardware and software, between the physical and the digital computing worlds. But it's not only things that are getting connected now. Everything is being connected. Humans, cows, even bees are now being connected. In Australia, there are bees flying around pollinating flowers with a tiny transistor on the back. It's quite astonishing. This is a project of Cyro, together with the help of Intel and some others, but it's really proliferating in many different aspects of our lives. Cisco definition of Internet of Everything is probably more appropriate, because everything is getting connected. Few people coming, okay. In many people describe IoT as the third revolution or third wave. Looking at the PC era, we moved 10 years after to the mobile era, and now it's the IoT era. We looked at, if you think about the internet, we moved from a personalized efficiency, we all had emails and e-commerce, to social connectivity, and now it's all IoT as well. The ability to collect data, to me, IoT is the ability to collect data, analyze it, and drive efficiencies. Software might be eating the world, but data is where the value is. When we talk about IoT, I like the analogy of an iceberg. So the Internet of Things, if you think about it, the Internet is probably the 70%, which is below the water, and the 30% is the thing themselves. What's below the water represents a huge opportunity. The first layer is the hardware infrastructure, including network, fiber, data centers, power, batteries. The second layer is the API, the cloud, the services, such as databases, storage, CPUs, security. And the third layer is the cloud and scale platform, like home automation, big data, development tools, and app marketplaces. What's above the water is what we're all getting excited about. It's the things. It's the devices, it's the smartphones, wearables, toys, industrial, and so on. before we get started, I just want to give a few points about Israel, what's IoT in Israel. So last week, there was a report published by the VC owned by Eric Schmidt, or led by Eric Schmidt, Google Executive Chairman, called Innovation Endeavors. They just released a report that they concluded after 3 months research in Israel about the IoT landscape in Israel. The key finding of the report were that IoT in Israel is actually very substantial. Very similar to the security hub, they found that there are actually 330 IoT companies currently, representing 5% of the startup in Israel. So it's estimated there are 6,100 startups in Israel. 5% of them are Internet of Things. The second thing they found out is that there is a concentration in the areas where Israel is strong already. So healthcare, life science, and cybersecurity are the 3 areas where most IoT companies operate in Israel. The other interesting conclusion is that most of the companies are actually still early stage. They are in the R&D phase and the early revenues. They also found out that 80% of the companies are focused around the application category, rather other levels like the other level of the stack, like the IoT platform and components. So in all, there is a concentration of security, cybersecurity, agtech, and healthcare, and they're very bullish about the opportunity of IoT developing as a major center or major innovation out of Israel. So with that, I would love to have the panel get going and ask the panelists, Hamish, Kevin, Esther, and Emma to come on stage. Is John in the audience here? No, okay. So apologies, but Mike Breyer, who was supposed to join us, had a family emergency, so he's not going to be able to join us. But thank you very much, guys, girls. Just a quick, so Kevin, I don't think need much of introduction. CTO at Cisco. Esther Lowy came from Israel, no, from China, but is residing in Israel for the last 10 years. She's a former New Yorker. Esther is the founder and CEO of Upround Ventures. She's a serious entrepreneur, global deal maker, and early champion of expanding Israel innovation to new strategic markets such as China and Southeast Asia. Emma LaRosso, welcome Emma. Emma LaRosso is an international leader, strategist, marketeer, coach, speaker, and writer. She co-founded Digivisor, Australia's leading social web analytics technology company, which customers of all sizes, including Lenovo, Telstra, Intel, and Combank. In 2015, Emma was asked to be part of Saro Accelerate On selection panel to help review high potential innovation ventures. John, you guys here. So I'd like to start with a few questions, and later on, if there's any time, we'll open up the mic to the audience. So where do you see, in short terms versus long terms, global IoT opportunities? In other words, where's the money? And particularly, I'd love to hear Kevin, from the infrastructure perspective, and Emma and Esther from consumers and industrials IoT. So where do you think is the money? There's a lot of talk about IoT. The hype is at its peak. So Gartner hype curve, IoT is right at the top. And there are a lot of people that are asking themselves, but where's the money? So maybe we'll start with Esther.
Well, as you mentioned, I actually came from China recently with 6 of our portfolio companies. And while I'm from New York in the US originally, it's really been interesting to note that IoT has actually been leading in China. China has taken the lead on it. One of our companies, Tekoya, which is about the connected home and universal remote, has the chairman and founder of Analog Devices as one of his early investors, sold his previous company to Samsung, one of those serial entrepreneurs we've been hearing about this morning, said to me, Esther, I'm in the US and I'm exhibiting at an IoT conference, and in China, I'm actually selling and partnering. So the connected home, the understanding of device life cycles, and understanding that appliance vendors, device manufacturers, they have to understand their consumer. It's not just about the quantity, but it's about the loyalty, and it's about upselling them and continuing them down the value chain. So we're very bullish and very excited that Israel, in the IoT arena, understands that China could very well be the next frontier.
Right. Emma?
So we know all customers want to know more about their own customers, and they're willing to spend money to map real-time data into that. There's only so much, and they get stuck with mining historical data. So this real-time, what are your customers doing? So as the Internet of Things, extends out into every device and ones we haven't even considered, there's so much data there, but it is actually all part of the digital footprint of a customer. So the opportunities, and where Digivisor backed originally in mapping social to the person at the heart of social, is how do people interact with devices, and what's their digital footprint, what matters to them, and how do organisations like us and others mine that for the value piece. So what is this actually telling you about this person's behaviour? Is it different? How do you actually synthesise all that data points and remove the noise, of which there'll be so much noise, to the value pieces? What is this really saying? Is this indicating a life stage change, a behaviour change, a sentiment change for them to be able to harness?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really about the application, how to use it, how to harness the data. And Esther, you talked about the China and opportunities there. Kevin, from infrastructure perspective, the nuts and bolts, what do we need to do, and where's the money there?
Okay, so first qualify. Cisco's not that focused in the consumer market. We don't think that's where the initial uptake's going to be. I know that there's a lot of connected toothbrushes and stuff, but from our point of view, what we're doing is and I guess I just need to explain, when we talk about the Internet of Everything, what we're really talking about is IoT, which is things producing data, and you need a lot of instrumentation and technology underneath that. But from our observation, the real impact of IoT only comes when you change either the people and or the process involved in an industry sector. So IoE is really things producing data, impacting people and process, and that's kind of important because our focus to date has been at the top end of town, so industries like mining and resources, manufacturing, we're already, in terms of show me the money, we're already generating north of $1 billion in revenue in that space. If you take a look in Western Australia right now, for over 2 years, Rio has been running 900 trucks that take 350 tons of iron ore per truck. They dump it onto trains, and those trains take the iron ore to the port, and there's no human being anywhere. It's all controlled from Perth. So that's all instrumented. It's a lot of data, and it's saving Rio about 12% per annum. So there's a lot going on at that top end of town at the moment, but eventually it's going to sort of be more pervasive.
Yeah. So we would like to explore where the competitive experiences, I call it competitive advantages, but more competitive experience. So we talked about agriculture a few times, about that's a strong area in Australia. Obviously, it's also a strong area in Israel. Where do you think the focus need to be for IoT in either of the countries to make it really drive it forward as a leading global leadership? Sure.
I think for a country like Australia with a small population, and I guess also this is true for Israel, is how do you bring the best of technology and what's possible to every size company. So I think the reason why consumer might not be relevant today is because it's very early stages, and the cost of being able to develop and roll this out and manage data in a meaningful way is yet to be developed, but it will be. So I think, for us and, as an industry and culture, it's, the best of technology may originally have that investment from the bigger companies, but what you want to do is make that accessible, affordable, to actually promote and connect into kind of the ecosystem of innovation at the grassroots.
Yep, thank you. Esther?
First of all, it's always about collaboration. We call it invented in Israel, expanded to Asia and the world. So I don't think little Israeli companies think they're going to necessarily at the start do it on their own. What Kevin brought up earlier about it's about enterprise and business. What we're seeing is the B2B2C, because the companies, the enterprises, of course, want to understand their consumer, better. Who are they? What do they want? How do we make sure that they stay our consumer? So the IoT companies we're seeing in Israel are the ones that are, in a very quick way, learning to partner. We're seeing that in China. The company I referenced earlier, partnering with one of the leading IoT players in Nanjing. And understanding Panasonic in Hong Kong, understanding how to kind of in small ways connect with those players, which of course there's a paradox there because the big players, as was mentioned, are often slower to the game and kind of need a kick in the rear end to get going. But the Israeli companies are good at doing that. So I think there's definitely a collaboration that's required.
So I'm not just making this up for the panel. A couple of years ago, we started thinking about what should we do in this part of the world as part of Cisco, and we focused on three areas, which we think is unique in terms of the Australian environment and what we can do on a global scale. Number one was resources, because clearly we're very rich in resources. At a time when the commodities market has plummeted, this is a time that mining companies are actually investing. So, in terms of how they do things, and there's a lot of value there. The second one is a bit surprising. It's astronomy. It's because we've been involved in the Square Kilometre Array. For those of you who are familiar with that project, since 2007, this is probably the biggest manifestation of IoT in the world. First 5 minutes that gets turned on in the Murchison Desert, it'll produce more data than the entire internet ever, and it's happening right here. So we're very involved with that. And then the third one, which is a bit of an anomaly for Cisco, because it's not one of our top 8 verticals, but it's agriculture. So mining and agriculture is what we think we can do some very powerful things with technology with. Agriculture is the least penetrated of IT of any sector. And we think that what we can do by instrumenting and informing the farmer can really help not just Australia in terms of producing what we do, but to enable us to export some of that technology as well. So I think there's a lot of potential, because I know Israel's been doing a lot of work in a couple of those areas, and there's a lot of potential for exchange of ideas and technology and capital and so on.
Yeah. So the next topic I want to talk about is multinationals. So we saw how many multinationals in Israel. I was very fortunate 20 years ago to be part of the team that started Intel in the south, very close to Beersheba, Intel Fab. That project was a $1.8 billion investment, and that created a huge effect to the entire ecosystem. Back then, Intel was one of the first and only few companies in Australia. In Israel, but now there's so many others. And to me, it's a crucial element to Australia to be able to attract multinationals to open R&D and operation in Australia. So I want to start with you, Kevin, to ask you what do you think we need to do in Australia to have to attract more multinationals to come here?
There are so many things that we need to do. It's interesting that Malcolm Turnbull's statement has really, I think, accelerated it. Now, the interesting thing is, and no discredit to him, I think a lot of us have been working on this for some time. But when a leader gets up and says, this is where we want to go, all of a sudden everybody gets behind it. And so I think that is really important, because it doesn't matter who you talk to in federal government, state government, they're all on, at least now, on page in terms of what we want to do. So that's pretty important. I think that companies like Cisco find it difficult to invest in countries like Australia. Okay, there's the obvious one, distance, but it's a whole range of things that need to start developing, and a lot was talked about today. It's not just, us sticking our neck out. There are a lot of things from tax law to the capital, whether our crowd can do their thing, to what a big one of mine is in research. The universities, I absolutely believe that a third of universities should be dedicated to blue sky research, but 2/3 should not be. It should be applied research, because most people who go to unis, correct me if I'm wrong, they want a job afterwards. And if they're doing stuff that's blue sky, and I do a lot of the work with the unis, they do a lot of theses, both undergrad and postgrad, that we'd never look at. It's completely irrelevant. So we need to get the universities closer to industry. So those are some answers. I'm sure you guys can fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
I mean, Kevin, you touched on education, which I think is a key thing. So it's the labour force that we need to do more here, and the incentive to be able to do it. But I think the other thing is the infrastructure. How do we make it easy to connect and operate frictionlessly with the rest of the world? And that is actually not a great experience here in Australia. So that's something that does have to be improved. And I think that's infrastructure, but it's also the philosophy of how we need to think about engaging and the view of the world. So that's an opportunity. But yeah, we won't attract more multinationals without changing that investment, the tax, the actual working capital and the cost of capital here.
Mm-hmm. For what you see in Israel, Esther, there's the obvious reasons why multinationals in Israel, and it's been a long history. But what do you feel are the things that could Australia do to attract more?
Well, first of all, I love it that, I come from a little city called New York originally, and yet I'm representing Israel for the last 10 years, which gives me a lot of joy. Some of it was mentioned earlier, but the risk-averse nature that I understand is more prevalent here in Australia. I see it a lot in China as well. It's a mindset and it's an ecosystem. So it's not only about the particular company, the multinational, but it's really the environment that supports risk-taking, that supports on the tax and regulatory side, that if a company doesn't succeed the first time, it's not considered bankrupt, and one cannot hold their head up high in society. But it's really a combination, and this summit is really tremendous in spearheading it. What will happen tomorrow? Will the folks here and the folks back in the office and in the government and in the other areas, will they, in small, lean teams come together and say, let's just kind of throw things together, let's bring some of the Israeli innovation here, whether it's to fund, whether it's to partner, whether it's a gateway to Asia. I have to say, when I mentioned I was coming here, some folks say, well, why Australia? It's a beautiful place to visit, but don't really see it. This is from the Israeli tech side. When I, in my conversations with Paul Israel, who's doing amazing work in Israel, and Charles Nightingale and Marcus Mandy, and the ICC, and of course, Eti Levy is fantastic. All of this really seemed to come together. There is a synergy. There's a lot of logic that goes into it in terms of the extension of Israeli technologies. So if Australia is ready to embrace that on a more less risk-averse mentality, then I think the Israelis are willing and ready to embrace it as well.
Yes, Kevin.
Can I just make another observation? When you look at Israel and in fact Silicon Valley, and you look at the type of startups, I call them tier 1, 2 and 3. Tier 3 are like kiddie stuff, up to $1 million to $10 million kind of exit. Tier 2 is 10 to 50 maybe, and then the big ones above that. The problem we've got in Australia is we've got too many tier 1s, lots and lots of tier 2s and not enough tier 1s. And for a Cisco, we're looking for the tier 1s. We're not looking for the small stuff. So if you want to attract the multinational, we as a country have got to think big. the companies that were put up earlier today, looking at some of the key trends in the world, those are the ones we're after. We want serious technology that will eventually, we're not looking to make $1 billion out of the company. We're obviously after much more than that to commercialize it as part of our portfolio. But the kind of technology we're looking at is tier one type technology, not the other stuff. And in Australia, our pyramid is like this, whereas in Israel, everybody wants to be $1 billion company, and that's good. That's a good thing.
Yes, I agree. So it leads me to the next question, which is about collaboration. So there's a lot of talk lately about how we can collaborate better between the two countries. If we take the IoT as an opportunity that is quite large for both countries, what do you think the practical means that we can actually collaborate? Is it starting incubators, mutual incubators in both countries, that we get Israeli entrepreneurs coming over here maybe as a launch pad if they want to launch to Asia, or whether it's a good size market to run a few experiments before they actually go to the States? English-speaking early adopters. What do you think is the practical ways to get that collaboration going?
I think money is good, always.
Well, Australia has plenty of that. It's not getting directed yet.
So, but you know what? Aside from the joke, it's really strategic. The companies we're seeing, the serial entrepreneurs, it's more than the money. It's really show me more than the money, the strategic value. So I think just from my meetings in Melbourne and here in Sydney, there's extraordinary talent that, coupled with capital, I think could provide tremendous value to the startups and those with greater experience. So these companies, they're not your Mark Zuckerbergs. They've sold 1, 2, 3. One of our companies has had 4 exits, lived in the Valley for 10 years, and it's on to the next frontier, So there, I think, requires a bit of education on what Australia has to offer, but I think, having more of these meetups, so to speak, they understand there's capital here, but if there's a know-how that can also help launch their companies on the global scale, at least in APAC, I think there's tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, Emma?
I spent a lot of time in China, and particularly, so as President and Chief Operating Officer of a ASX-listed electronics design software, so China was big. And it was right at the time when the government was setting the switch culturally. So every person, every company felt passionately committed to this switch from imitation to innovation. And it permeated everything, the education from kids, universities, investment, partnerships, relationships, investment, if it could prove. So I think having a look at that, I think it comes back to, and I guess it touches on that earlier question, but I think what builds a collaboration is when you ask the right question. What do we want to solve together? Smart people together do innovate. So if we have the right focus on what problems are we solving and what delight do we want to create in the world, then the idea becomes powerful and you have purpose and you have focus, and then that funding. So I think then it comes down to visibility. How are our governments helping, or how are corporates, how is that whole investment in that innovation culture supporting cross-fertilisation? So one of the best things in a global company is exposure. You've just been travelling. Your awareness of what's going on everywhere is so much greater than if you just tried to do it through research or a Skype call, or, there's something powerful in that ability to actually cross the shores and collaborate and come around those things. And good ideas will find funding. Yeah,
right.
So this message is more to Israeli startups. Why should they be interested in Australia? And my personal example, and I've been here for 30 years, both and in both cases as a sort of startup company as well as in Cisco. Even when you go back in Cisco 20 years ago, we were small here. And yet what happened with Cisco was the US invested in Australia quite heavily because we have some excellent system engineering talent. You look at a company like Telstra, in terms of what they do, we've got some really good engineering. Maybe not be as good in comparison to Israel in terms of startup and innovation and creation and production of innovation, but we're very good at absorption of it. And what I've seen over the years is that Australia has batted well above its weight in Asia. in taking our engineers into everything from Japan, India, and around ASEAN, in terms of helping them build out their technology infrastructure. So the message to Israel is that I think there's a great landing point in Australia to leverage the people we've got here to get into Asia in terms of, okay, you've got a product, how do you now commercialize the product, support the product, and grow the product? And I think that's something that I think is not quite as well as understood as it could be.
Yeah, not to mention that there's, I think, over 2 million Asian, Australian, or there's hundreds of thousands Asian students that are coming here every year to study, and they can definitely help in that market growth. With that, we'll have to conclude the panel discussion. Thank you very much, Kevin, Emma, and Esther.